Welcome, you're listening to talkradio.nyc. My name's Graham Dobbin, and welcome to the Mind Behind Leadership. It's always going to be a good show when we're dancing to the theme tune at the beginning. We're almost corpsing already, Christine. Look, we're lucky enough on a weekly basis to speak mainly to experts with an opinion. Today is no exception, but not just an opinion, ideas, opposing thoughts, things that are going to kind of push us. Got me thinking just the other day. Somebody asked me, is it thought leaders that I get on the show? And I kind of consider this, in my humble opinion, thought leaders never call themselves thought leaders. They kind of show it. It's all about doing. They don't need to tell anyone, they just are. So a label doesn't make anybody more credible. They instinctively make an impact. So there you go. There's my thoughts about thought leaders. So today's guest is one of those who does it by doing and challenging, showing. Christine develops teams as well as bringing through the next generation of coaches. This is my favorite bit, because this is where I kind of give a bit of a background to our guests, and this is where they get all embarrassed. So with today's guest, we have... Sorry.
We'll see.
Let's see. Christine Sachs is our guest today, and Christine is a Master Certified Coach with the ICF, and Accomplishment Coaching Certified Leadership Coach as well. Oh, coach is going to come up a lot today, that word. Christine has been a coach to HR professionals from various agencies within the United Nations. Now, she's especially skilled at working with high performance on the next level of leadership. We're going to be talking a lot about that today. And the skills that Christine is particularly good at and bringing out is that authentic communication, executive presence, team dynamics, and one that's going to be a big topic for today is overcoming self-doubt, or the fancy name is Imposter Syndrome. Now, prior to doing this, Christine was a highly successful fundraising professional for top flight universities in the US and abroad. But get this, I think this was hidden the last time you spoke, Christine. You're an award-winning playwright and holds a master's degree in English, which is a real problem for me, from Washington University. Bit of personal background, Christine lives in Manhattan with her husband, Tony, her daughter, Vivian, and their cat, Princess. My guess is that Christine named Princess. Great to see you, Christine.
Good to see you. You're looking well. I love you. You look refreshed in your new location.
Oh, thank you. Well, just for anyone, we're coming live from Sydney and New York today. So it is 8 a.m. in Sydney on Tuesday morning, 6 p.m. I believe in New York. So the end of the day. So thank you for that. This is what the morning does. Give us a little bit of background. How did what's your story? How did we get to this point, Christine?
Let's see. Way back when. No. How I became a coach. This is a fun story. So I was working for a very fancy British university, and it was actually a great life. Like, I was interacting with the power players of the world, basically, because this was the kind of institution where all you had to say is, hey, I'm from this institution, and everybody wanted to talk to you. But I was bored. And I had a toddler at home. She was 17 months. And I said, is this my life? Is this what I'm going to do the rest of my life? And it was great work. Like, don't get me wrong, it was really great work, but there's something around the academic calendar that's very routine. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine was like, well, you're bossy. Why don't you become a life coach? And I was like, can I curse on this? I was like, bitch, do you know me?
You can do what you want, Christine. You can do what you want.
I was like, what? You call me the queen of darkness. What makes you think that I am going? Because I make this joke that I was the only New Yorker who had never done any personal development, never done therapy. So I didn't know what coaching was. And so trusted friend, I thought, okay, well, maybe she sees something I don't. And so I did a whole ton of research. Yeah. And basically picked a program that I still train with. And it was really the most profound year of my kind of like adult education, because nobody had ever asked me to look at the places in the way that they had. You know, if you think about anyone who has gone to college or even high school, it's very tactical, vaguely related to life skills. There isn't a lot of self-exploration typically. And so these were questions that were asking me about, why did I want to do what they did? Why do I choose what I choose? How do I listen to people? And I just found it, the more I did it, the more interested I was in it. And that's how it evolved from coaching to the team stuff, to assessments, to being with people as they, being and working with people through the changes of leadership. And, the old axiom of what got you here won't get you there. Like this is all of it. Like we always think we're kind of done. We're like fully baked at like what, 25, but then we think we're fully baked at 35, and then we think we're fully baked by 50. But in watching people, I work with people of all age groups, all the generations. And it's hilarious how they talk about each other. That's a whole other podcast. But to hear how they, at every life stage, they think that they're done. And then they discover the next level of work that they could do if they chose it. And so that's the thing for me that keeps me interested in coaching and doing what I do, because it's never boring. People are infinitely fascinating.
Yeah. Why do we not ask ourselves these questions? Because one of the things you just said, it was a profound year, you kind of a lot of self-discovery, asking questions that challenge us. So if we step back from kind of like what it's like to coach others, when we go through it ourselves, why do we not ask ourselves these questions?
I don't think well, let me say it this way. I think it's different now because coaching and therapy is so much more mainstream than it was then. Yeah. I'm sorry to say, I think we're peers. So when we were young, it was not a thing. So I don't want to presume.
I think you're being unkind to yourself, Christine.
I don't know. I actually think I'm older than you. But I think that, I don't know that the communities that I grew up in were interested in that sort of thing. They were much more interested in, what do I need to do to survive? What do I need to do to buy a house? What do I need to put food on the table, get my kids to camp, and all the other stuff that they wanted to do? How do I pay for college? So those were the questions that they were most involved with, which was a jump from the generation before them, which was like, how do I get a job? My grandmother was a Depression baby, and so there was that whole mentality. So I think it's just, well, privilege, right? Certain people, certain socioeconomic levels, some races, there's the privilege of being able to have the time and space to think about this stuff. And I think that it's more mainstream. So it's in the lexicon. Pixar has made a living out of making movies that ask these questions. So it's being introduced to children at a younger age in a much more direct way than, say, Tom and Jerry cartoons. There's an existentialism to that, but wow, not quite as obvious as, like, say, Pixar.
You mentioned growing up, so we jumped straight into working in this superb university in the UK. My guess is there was something before that. How did we get from kind of growing up and those peers around you that were looking to survive or just get a job, or kind of this is how it's always been done, to there? How do you get to that point?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I think it's probably not an unusual experience. I think the difference for me is that it was heightened because I'm adopted. So I was adopted by, so if you're listening to this and you can't see me, I'm Korean American, but I was adopted into a white family. And so identity was it was kind of always at the forefront, but we never really talked about it. And so, and then the environments that we're living in, they really didn't talk about it either. And then, there's my family, and then there was high school, and then there was college, and every environment was a little bit more of an opening to, like, oh, here are different things. Here are different ways people see me different. I see people differently. the things that I see on American television don't ring true necessarily for the reality of people in the world, you know. And then when I mean, working for the British institution was really kind of just luck. I lucked into the job, but it was really interesting to go there and have varied experiences of like being with some of the brightest minds in the world. And then, you know, there are some people there who literally wouldn't talk to me. And it was fine. Well, I was at the university, and there was a porter for one of the colleges.
Uh-huh.
I asked them a question and they answered my colleague. And then I asked another question and they answered my colleague. I was like, I have never experienced this. This is crazy.
How do you deal with something like that? Sarah, how do you deal with something in the moment? In the moment, how do you deal with something like that?
Well, this was before I'd done any of their personal development. At first I was confused. And then I remembered being hurt because I was like, oh, you know, having a particularly insular experience, you know, that was the other thing. Prior to coaching, I would keep myself inside of communities and environments that didn't challenge me very much because part of me didn't want to be challenged in that way, because who knew if I would, you know, come up against this stuff. So confused and then hurt, and then because I'm me, petty, and I wanted to get revenge. So I had my colleague. So then I just stopped talking when the porter wanted to ask me a question, but asked my colleague who had no idea. So I just stared at her like, what are you going to do? Because he's not talking to me. And so kind of let her play the intermediary between us. So, but the long story short is that I these are the experiences that kind of led me into coaching and to ask those questions like, well, why did that? Like, I could have just had that knee jerk, like racist, whatever. But I took a step through beyond that and just said, well, why? What makes somebody hold those beliefs? What creates those stories about people? Because I'm living proof that like, I may be born in this body, but the physical exterior, I don't feel that internally. So what makes people create the images and the ideas about race and gender and ethnicity and all of it that we use to create separation? And so that was kind of, all of these things were little pebbles along the way that just sort of led me to the asking the questions of myself and seeing that being challenged in this way helped me, but also then helped everybody else.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm kind of doing a lot of reading at the moment. We're getting prepared for some activity around DE&I, and it's really interesting kind of having that discussion with potentially who I would see as peers around me. And some of this is new stuff where it's just been reality for so many people for such a long time. And it's easy to sit here and philosophize about how we would react to things or what we should do, what we shouldn't do. But it's in the moment. It's not that easy because it's personal. Everything's personal.
Well, and the knee jerk is like, do you pay attention to the hurt or do you pay attention to the connection? Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're up on the news in the US around the Supreme Court leak. And yeah, so my husband and I have been having an active conversation about this. And he was, Lord love him, he said like, well, you know, men should, men, I would think that men would want to have consequence-free sex. And I'm like, you do. And I'm like,
wow.
First of all, well, I was like, do you know how difficult it is to actually get child support paid? And secondly, do you know how many rapes go unreported and then how many actually get convicted? You do. But from an angry perspective, from you're an ignorant perspective, like that was going to be a big fight. But from a curiosity around, he doesn't have any other perspective than being a man.
Yeah.
So
what, we're going to go for a break. Sorry, Christina, just cut across. I think we've got a slight delay here. We're going to go for a break. When we come back from the break, let's dig into a little bit more about that, the kind of the different perspectives and also something you mentioned earlier about privilege. Really curious about how that changes as we move forward. You're listening to the Mind Buying Leadership. We're lucky enough to have Christine Sachs with us today, and we'll be right back after these.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant. And on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you on edge? Hey, we live in challenging, edgy times, so let's lean in. I'm Sandra Bargman, the host of The Edge of Every Day, which airs each Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc. Tune in live with me and my friends and colleagues as we share stories and perspectives about pushing boundaries and exploring our rough edges. That's The Edge of Every Day on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Mind Buying Leadership live here on talkradio.nyc. It's drive time in New York, and it's Tuesday morning here in Sydney, and we're with Christine Sachs. Christine, we kind of went down this route. I wasn't kind of prepared. Sorry, down this route quite early. This is super. I'm curious about how we kind of change our thinking when we're talking about coaching. And you said that the word bossy was used for you, which is interesting. It was actually on a session last night where there was a large chat about how the word bossy is quite offensive to the group that I was working with. And we also spoke about kind of why we don't ask ourselves these questions that we do in coaching. Why is coaching so powerful? But just talk to me about difference again, because it seems like you've come through, whether consciously or unconsciously, you've kind of come through just dealing with difference all your life.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question. So you want me to talk about...
One of the things you said about having been adopted, and then kind of you've got what everybody else sees, this body that everybody else sees, and kind of makes up an impression. How has that helped or challenged you as you've kind of moved through things?
Well, I will say I don't have a measure because it's
your reality. Yeah.
What I will say is, and I think this is true of anyone who isn't who might identify as biracial or adopt an interracial or transracial adoption, is that there's I won't speak for everyone because everyone is different, but like for me, in DEI circles, it's called code switching. But I think it's more of, there is the foundational experience of not belonging
Mhm.
and a set of rules that you know you need to follow to belong. And then sometimes those rules align with who you are and sometimes they don't. And in my particular position, because I'm it's not like being Asian in America or Black in America. I'm like Asian, having grown up in a white family. There are things about white community or white culture that I understand and know, but I'm not accepted into because of what I look like. And then things about Asian culture that I don't understand or not accepted into because I'm very clearly white to them, or a banana Twinkie, whatever you want to call the fun name for it. So, oh yeah, I think the new terminology is boba liberal. That's what I would be called.
Right, okay, it's a new one on me. I'll check that one out.
So, but what I think it does is it allows for for me, a level of compassion and empathy that I don't know how I would have formed otherwise, because I understand what it means to feel different all over, like in a variety of spheres. And it's through the empathy, but also some of the coping skills to have to adapt and fit in to all these different places that I feel like I don't belong, that has created my ability to kind of mold myself into what's needed in the moment, which is a leap, you know?
Yeah, it's like maybe even a clumsy question here. I kind of was going down the route that I just wondered how much that helped you see things from other people's perspectives and maybe gave you that opportunity to poke that little bit further, because it's been something that you've dealt with.
Well, so I think that's a different thing, right? I think that the willingness to give up the rightness of my opinion is different from being able to poke further, because that is all about the relationship. Ain't nobody going to give a crap about my experience if I don't form that relationship with them before we go into high depth conversation. So I think, but the ability to have that high depth conversation comes in because I'm willing to give up the rightness of my position or my opinion, that, like, you know what, I don't know, but I want to empathize, I want to support, like, can I put that? And I'm willing to say that I'm not going to try to connect with you on the superficial things that I think I understand about you and your culture. You know, I mean, I'm sure you hear it all the time when all the tourists come in and they ask for a shrimp on the Barbie, and you're not even Australian. You're like, what are they doing? You know, so.
The alternative about being Scottish is not always good, so I'll take the shrimp and the Barbie at the moment. About the people that I've met who keep on telling me that they're Scottish and never been there. But it's interesting because we speak about belonging. One of the things we're talking about, we will come to this a little bit later as well, because when we talk about all these headlines of what's happening in business at the moment, the movement of people, the Great Migration or the Great Resignation or whatever you want to call it, when we're looking at pulling people in, and I strongly believe that personal relationships and work relationships or culture or environment are just, they overlap all over. It's not one or the other. And up there in kind of the top 2 or 3 is always belonging. People want to belong somewhere. And you kind of mentioned that sometimes that's not always there for us. I've known that from moving country, which should be really simple. Moving from Scotland to the US and then to Australia, we think that's a really easy transition. You know, we all speak the same language, or derivatives of it, and the culture should be fairly similar. It's not, and that's really light compared to what a lot of other people go through.
Right. Well, and I also think it depends on how, you know, where the value of belonging lives for the generation. Mm-hmm. Baby boomers, belonging, they don't care. They don't care. It's not important. Right? They're like, I just do my job, I go home. Like, belonging is not a thing for them. They assume, there's a certain assumption, right? Because they had their pensions and you stayed at a company for forever. Like, it wasn't a value they needed to espouse or fight for.
Yeah.
And then Gen X has a different experience because everybody skips over us. And then there are millennials, which started the whole thing, right? Which needed a lot of like the stereotype is that they're the generation that needed a lot of feedback. They're the ones who really fought for like, well, what's the training? What's my development path? What's my career path? What's the feedback? Now to the Gen Zers who are very focused on I mean millennials too, but like for whom all of this has developed into something that we have now come to coin as belonging, and that need to have community in a way that was very different than the boomer generation.
It's interesting. I was looking at some just a couple of weeks ago, and somebody mentioned that they were a millennial, gave themselves that tag. And when I pointed out the millennials are now in their 40s at the top end, that really stopped the question. So we're beginning to get this shift all over.
Yeah, do you remember when they were the young ones, when they were like the people driving the boomers crazy?
Do you know, it wasn't until it's interesting. It wasn't until I went to New York that someone said to me, kind of joking, but you know what it's like when there's a joke, there's regularly something behind it. Said I was part of the problem. Explain to you, what do you mean? Middle-aged white guy, you're part of the problem. In fact, you are the problem. And as the conversation went on, you could feel the kind of the passion that they actually meant part of this. And that was probably the first time that I've ever actually sat down and really considered how I was seen, how I was looked at. And I can't imagine what that's like, kind of like on a constant basis. The real shock. It was a real shock to the system. You mentioned also privilege earlier, about people being privileged or not having that privilege when we grew up. Kind of being kind of ready to just get on the treadmill and just do what we need to do. Do you think you're privileged now?
I think that everyone has privilege. I think that it depends on who's using it and what it's used for. Right. So there are some people who will like carte blanche say all white people have a certain level of privilege, which is true.
Yeah.
Right. But you know, there are, you know, there are plenty of, you know, BIPOC individuals who will become quite incensed if you say that they don't have any privilege. And they're like, I have privilege. It's just not white privilege, but it's privilege, like whether it's educational, gender, you know, where they live in the country, you know. So privilege it's a tricky question. It's really more of the I think, like anything else, is the awareness of how your privilege acts for you and where you are unconsciously the beneficiary of privilege. And, you know, I think it's always that question of like, where are you aiding, abetting the system that keeps certain structures in place, as opposed to, you know, well, this is just the way it is, or no, I got here on my, you know, blood, sweat, and tears. Like, well, you did, and, you know, it doesn't take away from your effort, but, you know, there are varying degrees of things that helped different people along. And that, you know, cuts across it. It's clearest to see, for example, in, you know, white people versus other cultures.
Again, I didn't see it and probably didn't experience it and didn't kind of challenge it until I got to the US. So again, it was something that I've never really had to look at, and it was quite confronting actually. And I realized what was actually going on.
Yeah.
Look, we're going to take a break. Sorry, go on, Christine, just before we go.
I was just going to say, but like part of the confronting thing is just simply because it's not been part of how you've walked through the world.
Yeah.
Your parents, your community never, and I don't mean just like the white community, I just mean community in general, don't ask the hard questions. If you've always grown up asking yourself these hard questions, the willingness to have these conversations is just easier. Yeah.
I think if I did one of those DNA tests, it would actually put me down to a street in Scotland. That would be about it. That would be all. That would be it, unfortunately. Look, we're about to take a break. When we come back, let's talk about one of the things we spoke about at the very beginning, about the self-doubt, about imposter syndrome, and kind of how that shows up. Because my guess is what we've just been talking about is something that really kind of adds to it, or certainly needs to be put into the mix. You're listening to The Mind Behind Leadership. We are in-depth conversation with Christine Sachs today on talkradio.nyc. We'll be back after these.
Howdy, I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, host of the new podcast, Gateway to the Smokies. It airs on talkradio.nyc every Tuesday night from 6 p.m. to 7. Every episode is dedicated to memorable experiences in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and surrounding areas. This show features experts and locals who will expound upon the richness of culture, history, and adventure that awaits you in the Smokies. Tune in every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 7 on talkradio.nyc.
Are you passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauber, employment law, business law attorney, and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc, now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
And welcome back. You're listening to The Mind Behind Leadership. We're with Christine Sachs, and we're talking about everything. I think we've talked about everything in the last 30 minutes. This is something that I absolutely love, Christine. And I remember when you were on the last time as well, we kind of got a plan on what we're going to talk about, and then it just goes somewhere else. That's really cool. That's really cool. Seriously. Great to get the insights. One of the things we spoke about earlier, and I know this is a personal passion for you, and you probably see it from a different perspective because you're working with clients and you're also developing coaches. So you're working at two levels here. And this thing called imposter syndrome. Talk to me about imposter syndrome.
Oh my God, you're like in a candy store. Have you done much reading about imposter syndrome?
I've done a little bit. I'm really curious to kind of see what your perspective is, because I know it's a particular area of expertise for you.
Expertise is a heavy word, Graham.
I know, that's what I'm putting on it. Let's set the bar high. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. Well, it actually was coined as imposter phenomenon in 1978 by Pauline. Do you know this? Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes.
No.
They were studying. Okay, so they were two researchers who were studying women and women of color in higher education institutions and these feelings of doubt and fraud. And so it became known as the imposter phenomenon, and how it was specifically around women and women of color. And their idea was the personal impacts of systemic structures of racism and sexism that were creating this. Through the decades, though, it became translated into imposter syndrome and became it became coined as an individualized experience, and the whole systemic foundation, like the systemic foundation or causation, got eradicated. So a lot of people, when they talk about imposter syndrome, they localize it as a problem inside themselves, as opposed to very normal reactions and coping mechanisms to living inside of a system that generates these experiences.
talk me through the difference of that, and what difference that means, and when we take it away from kind of generally what's happening in the culture and environment around us, to is that us blaming ourselves when we take it?
So, right. So what is professional behavior?
That's a big question. I don't know. I don't know. That's what's professional behavior. My guess, most people would start to put tags on it, but to me, it's individual. It's what our boundaries are. We know kind of what's socially acceptable within a business and what should be. But my guess is that's been blurred over the last few years.
Well, I would say that there are certain norms that most companies and practice, right? And who creates professional behavior? Who creates the standard of professionalism?
It tends to be the generations before us.
Who were mostly.
Oh my goodness, you blaming me again?
Yes, I blame you. All of you and all the people. But I mean, but this is the thing, right? Like when there was a segregated workforce, let alone black and white or color and white, men and women, right? Like when it was all men in the workforce, these were the people, they were setting the norms for behavior, dress, attendance, decorum, language. It was all inside of a masculine paradigm. And then you introduce all these other individuals, women, men and women of color, gay people, and suddenly you're asking all of these folks to assimilate into the culture because that's the cultural norm, right? God, there's a term for it in the gay community. I can't remember what it is right now. I just read that thing, but it's basically where you, if you give me a second, I can find it.
This is an interesting kind of take. Just whilst you find that, one of the things that, so we talk about it being male dominated, or that's where the workforce was. And then within that, you mentioned your background. No privilege. My background was kind of very working class or blue collar, as you would talk it in the US, and the amount of times I had, how did somebody from my hometown end up working in New York, almost as if that shouldn't happen. So I got a lot. A lot of that was some people really proud and like, wow, you've done well, and others were, oh, this isn't good enough for you. Right. Really? So you reject it.
Right. So the term that I was looking for is called covering. So in the spectrum where you can hide your difference, like say, if you're gay and you're a white gay person, or an immigrant from another country, you can downplay your accent. You cannot associate with other Scottish people. You can pretend you're not gay, and that's a way to create artificial belonging, or it's really more fitting in, so that the things that are different about you are not picked on. And the challenge is that through the individual, I think you know this, but like as we've moved through the generations, we've moved away from big systems thinking to individualized thinking. And so with that, we've taken the focus away from the systems that create this dissociation or disconnection to individualizing it and saying, because you don't feel confident, you're not competent. So we need to have you feel confident, and that will breed competence, which is not quite the same thing, but it gives us this false hope of, oh, if I conquer this feeling of imposter syndrome, I will be better. I will fit in. I will belong. Now, it's a both and, because yes, there are things that we can take on individually, but it's sort of like taking them on, understanding that you're taking them on inside of a system that will generate and create more things that will make you feel insecure.
Okay.
So it's both growing yourself and asking yourself the difficult questions as a measure of growth, as opposed to a measure of fitting in.
So how do we tackle that as individuals? Because one of the things that's definitely happened over the last couple of years, and I know there's so much focus on it, change happens all the time. It's just been with us, whatever. It's just it's a little bit more polarized over the last couple of years, and we're dealing with things that we maybe didn't deal with before, but we've still got kind of those norms, we've got those models that we can work with. One of the exciting things for me is people are challenging more. So when we talk about the great resignation or migration or movement of people, it's just that they're challenging the norm. Surely that's gives people confidence and strength, but also it's good for everything around us.
If it's actually changing the norm. I read an article today that people who are moving inside of the great resignation are not moving into places that actually they get these new jobs and they're not as happy, right?
Yeah.
Or they're less happy, right? So that's what I mean. Like, the challenging of the system is great, but if you end up in the same situation because you haven't addressed the system at the same time that you've addressed the internal thing, then you're just moving the chess pieces around. Sure, maybe you have a little bit more money, but as well as I do, lifestyle creep means that's not going to be enough in a couple of years or in a couple of months.
Yep.
So I think so I run this imposter workshop in New York, and I do it live on purpose so that you can be around people and work. So I do it in situ, so like there are specific locations so that the environment drives up some of the things that we typically associate with imposter syndrome, so that we can look at them in the moment. But we do I have a lot of focus on what's imposter syndrome and what's not imposter syndrome, so that we're very clear that this is a structural conversation, and this is the stuff that you can, if you choose to, work on, right? Like, what are my triggers? What has me react the way I do? The Viktor Frankl stimulus and response, and that's the space of, and that's the space of growth. So it's a similar concept. So yes, the system may be this way. And so who am I and how will I respond in the face of that? And that's the challenge question for the individual that may or may not impact the system. So it really depends if you have a commitment to impacting the organizational system, because most of us in the world are not going to impact the big global stuff, because we're just not in those positions.
Look, we're going to have a final break. When we come back from the break, there's a couple of things, and we need to have a chat offline as well, Christine, because there was a post just gone up yesterday, and I'm involved with a metaverse event in the next couple of weeks, talking about the great correction. And we are absolutely convinced that there's going to be a correction on this. People not happy in the jobs, that regardless of how much money they get, it's kind of obvious. So you're the first person that's actually mentioned this to me, that we seem to be on the same kind of wavelength, that we see that this is going to be extended for another 18 months, a couple of years at least, where people are changing in that. So we're going to have another little bit of a chat about kind of how maybe imposter syndrome shows up, what we can do about it. Do we downplay ourselves? I heard you saying earlier, I hope you don't mind me highlighting this, that you just lucked into a job. I'm wondering, when we're talking about the British University, I wonder if when we talk like that to ourselves, is that all part of it? You're listening to The Mind Behind Leadership. We're having a fascinating discussion with Christine Sachs today. We'll be back after these.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
In a post-COVID world, you may have many unanswered questions regarding your health. Are you looking to live a healthier lifestyle? Do you have a desire to learn more about mental health and enhance your quality of life? Or do you just want to participate in self-understanding and awareness? I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each Thursday, I will tackle these questions and work to enlighten you. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will be frank about health to advocate for all of us.
Calling all pet lovers.
Pet Avengers, assemble!
On the Professionals and Animal Lovers show, we believe the bond between animal lovers is incredibly strong. It mirrors that bond between pets and their owners. Through this program, we come together to learn, educate, and advocate.
Join us live every Wednesday at 2 p.m. at talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
It's always, Christine, it's always a sign when the conversation's really deep that we forget to dance to the music. It's because we come in, we're thinking about what we're going to say. That's it. We've got the game face on. Listening to the Mind Behind Leadership, we're speaking with Christine Sachs. We're on talkradio.nyc, and we're talking about imposter syndrome, or that kind of self-doubt that my guess is most people have. Would that be fair to say?
Yes. Typically, I find that like some people are very readily name it, and other people are like, I didn't think I had imposter syndrome, and then I read the list of like descriptors, like, oh my god, I totally have it. I always say like you're basically if you don't feel imposter syndrome at some point in your life, you're a sociopath.
Well, I definitely feel it. So I don't want labeled as a sociopath, not again. It's a bit early in the morning for me. Here's a big question. Do you have it?
Yes. Oh my God, yes.
I know.
I was leading the pilot version of this workshop the first day, and it was like I came home and I was just like, oh, I'm the worst. They scored me all 10s on the end of day evals. I'm like, oh, they're gonna like not come tomorrow. And it was supposed to snow. So like everybody made it into the place where we were having it on the second day in a snowstorm. Mm-hmm. And we were opened up the data sharing, and I said, well, let me show you how it works in the real world. And I shared with them my experience of like how I just knew they were all going to quit. They were going to want their money back, and it was terrible, and my everything. And they're like, so all the good stuff we wrote on your evals didn't mean anything. I'm like, zero. Because one of the things about imposter syndrome is that in those moments, your feelings become facts. And it's one of the signs of imposter syndrome is that your feelings of self-doubt, your feelings of insecurity become the truth. Mm-hmm. And then from that place, it's hard to create more empowering truths because the rock of the place that you're starting from says you're terrible, and that's true, and there's nothing you can do about it. Or you can try really hard, but the real truth is that you're terrible.
So how do we deal with that? I'm genuinely curious how you deal with that. I can really, really relate to you getting the feedback. Every external sign is telling you that everything's great, but in the mind, it's never good enough.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
So the short answer is choice. Mm-hmm. The longer answer is practice. Because what you're really doing, I mean, you know this as a coach yourself, like or just read James Clear's Atomic Habits, right? I mean, it's ultimately that thing, which is like, you've had X number of years practicing this other pattern of behavior. Mm-hmm. Making one choice in one moment, or just deciding one day with toxic positivity that you're going to feel different is not going to change it. It's not going to. And the thing is also, if you take your feelings to be true, you're waiting for your feelings to shift. And your feelings are likely going to be some of the last things that shift, as opposed to consistently willing to choose, like, okay, whatever it is for you, right? And it's going to be different for everybody, but I want to keep learning, or I'm going to put my faith in just the one step at a time, or I'm going to play. And then eventually you'll retrain your internal system to read the evidence differently, which will create a different emotional experience. But it takes precision, it takes intention, it takes practice. It takes a willingness to not believe the things that have always told you and kept you safe, because there is also some level of safety in feeling bad about yourself.
Yeah, I think interesting. I'm just kind of, as you're talking about it, I'm thinking, how did I get to it? And I think I did. It's a New York thing before I got there, the FOMO. The fear of missing out was actually worse than the potential failure or something like that. I never wanted to turn around and say, I wish I'd done this. So I would try it and almost be prepared to fail.
Right.
So,
so you put your focus somewhere else, as opposed to like staying in the feeling of like, well, what if, and failure is terrible and stuff. So that's definitely one way. Like refocus.
I'm not convinced it takes away the fear of the failure anymore. It's just as you say, the focus is elsewhere. And when the failure comes, well, listen to my language. When it comes, we'll kind of deal with it. But until that point, I'll just keep it as far away as possible.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Like, do you play football at all?
Do I play? But proper sports, yeah, yeah.
So, you have experience of losing and failing all the time. It's just in that context, it's okay.
Yeah.
Because inside that context, it's a part of the game. It's a part of the experience.
Yep.
Now over here, everyone has just decided that failure is the only game. And in sport, it makes the winning more sweet when you actually lose. Not always, but it's not as loaded with your identity as it is in other places. And so that's what I'm saying. It's like we fail all the time. You fail all the time.
Yeah.
Just how you've chosen to where you've chosen to put significance, how you've chosen to contextualize it.
It's interesting because again, when we take it in that kind of context, you fail, but you've got the ability to do better, or you will try something else to move on. I'm curious, we've only got a few minutes left, Christine. I kind of want to get to a couple of things here, thinking about how you develop coaches to be thinking about this. What kind of traits do you think when somebody coming into coaching, what do they need to be able to be as open as you are, to be able to kind of see it from those perspectives and be kind of, it's almost, dare I say, vulnerable as you are? What kind of traits does somebody new coming into this need?
Well, it's very different based on where you're starting from. If you're like me, a little bit more type A, patience, and honestly, of being willing to not be right.
Okay.
Right. I sound very strong in my opinions. Right. Like there's, when if you know that you have a particularly competitive motivating factor, being willing to not be right, being willing to be in partnership is really probably one of the key characteristics. For people who are much more sensitive and in touch with their emotions, more stamina and resilience is likely some of their traits. For folks who come out of consulting, it is a willingness to be, and I say this in a very generic stereotype. But I find that one of the traits for consultants is that vulnerability that comes with not being right and making mistakes and being human, not just being product delivery systems.
Yeah.
So it really depends on where you're coming from.
I assume just exactly the same within the GFC happened, that kind of during this movement, you're going to get a lot of people who want to do coaching. They see that as a kind of a lifestyle. Very last question, and we don't have much time, so we're going to have to put this in. What's the biggest myths about coaching or coaches? What do you think?
I think for people, probably the two biggest myths are it's an easy way to make money.
Jeez, yes. I remember those days thinking that.
And the second thing is that I think for clients, a lot of people think coaching is a quick fix.
Mm.
It has the veneer of problem solution. We're not therapy. We're not digging to your emotions. But what most coaches are dealing with are very embedded, very deeply held belief systems and patterns of behavior. And that stuff just takes time. And people are surprised at how long when I suggest a particular level of investment of time. Because most of my clients, it's not the financial investment that's challenging for them, it's the time investment.
Yeah.
That's the thing, that they don't realize that they actually need that much time to change their behavior.
I remember when I came into this, I was absolutely certain that I could help everybody, and everybody needed help. And then I got this sudden realization that nobody actually necessarily wanted it, which was used. Christine, thank you so much. I could talk for hours with you. We've gone kind of, one of the big things, if feelings become the truth, that was one of the big things that resonated with me today. We kind of talked around what differences are, how we see other people, and just about how we this imposter syndrome, this kind of self-doubt thing, how it's kind of constantly there. It's about how we manage it and deal with it rather than dismissing it. Christine, I hope we get a chance to speak again. Thank you so much. How can people contact you?
You can reach out to me via my website, www.christinesachscoaching.com.
Thank you. Hopefully we'll see you again. Thank you to Dylan Nelson, who's been in the background making sure that we are all good on the tech side for producing. We'll see you again next week on The Mind Behind Leadership. Have a safe week. Bye-bye.